Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Groot. I'm with the U.S. Geological Survey. I manage communication, education, outreach, and technical partnerships for the ShakeAlert earthquake early warning system. I'm with the USGS for about 3 years now. I spent 17 years before that at the Southern California Earthquake Center, which is headquartered in Southern California. Was involved in the development of the Great Shakeout earthquake drills. We've come a long way since 2008, and of course, ShakeAlert is figuring very heavily into the work that we're doing with ShakeAlert, and I'll go into it a little bit later on. I'm actually here to provide background about ShakeAlert, how it works, how people are going to use it, and be sort of the stepping off point for discussion about how we are going to use ShakeAlert with this very, very important sector, in terms of formal educational environments, informal environments like museums, and also in child care centers and early childhood learning centers as well. So very broad sort of spread here. And not only thinking about what's key here is the public safety part of it, but also the aspect of the opportunity to be able to use this as a teaching moment. Of course, we have lots of representatives here today from the Incorporated Research Institution for Seismology, or IRIS, who are going to be speaking to us about the work that's being done in ShakeAlert in terms of the educational experiences. So we'll get into that a little bit later. I sort of organized my first 5 slides today so that we could get through a lot of the details in a summary mode first, and then there's more details we can get in a little bit later. I want to set some context also to give a broader picture of the ShakeAlert communication, education, and outreach enterprise to give you a sense of how we're doing our work. I'm not going to make this an exhaustive discussion, but I just want to give some context. And I think really this first slide that I have up now, first of all, follow us on Twitter. I have to say that. There will be a post going on today about this event. So we're making creative use of seismic waves, what earthquakes do, and the ability for communications to move at almost the velocity of light, and using that to take advantage of being able to get out an alert to people and things. And so this first slide is sort of the basic diagram that we use. We show to folks all the time that we have seismometers out in the field, and basically those seismometers do the detection, that information is sent to processing centers, and then the wheels go into motion. So I'll be showing a little bit more about that here in a second. Just to give you a justification for why ShakeAlert is first being implemented in Washington, Oregon, and California is actually shown there. If ShakeAlert realizes saves a fraction of 1% of the losses that Maxine referred to earlier, ShakeAlert is a successful enterprise. We're also looking at potential expansion to other states. I know that Nevada, there's a lot going on in Nevada these days. About 90% of Nevadans live within 50 miles of the California border. And of course, there's also some discussion, at least Director Riley of the USGS has talked a bit about bringing the greater Anchorage area of Alaska. So one of the major talking points about ShakeAlert that, and I think a lot of you have encountered this, is that ShakeAlert is not the panacea. It's not the solution to all of our earthquake risk issues. It's a tool in the toolbox. Points with the whole idea that we will use ShakeAlert is as one very important piece to reduce earthquake risk, but we cannot stop doing what we've already been doing. And that's a key thing to this. So this is how ShakeAlert fits into the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program, but what we're doing is folding it in with all of our other products that you know about, such as earthquake notification, ShakeMap, Pager, etc. So this is sort of the organizing slide. I've talked a little bit about this whole idea of putting out these sentinels in the field. And when it's all said and done, there'll be 1,675 of them throughout the West. And we're about halfway there, about 54% of the way there, both in California and the Pacific Northwest. They're kind of grouped separately, NSN boundaries versus the Northern California and Southern California seismic networks. And there are 3 processing stations, one each in Pasadena, Menlo Park, and in Seattle, that are the sort of the under the hood pieces that take the information from the field, process it, and make decisions whether or not to issue shake alerts. So what you're looking at in this diagram is actually something that many of you have seen, is that, and it also shows what the USGS's responsibilities are related to shake alerts. Is the whole idea that we're responsible for actually detecting the earthquakes and processing that information, making a decision whether or not to publish a shake alert. And then once that shake alert is published, we hand it off to a whole variety of end users who will, for people to do things and for things to do things. But this is a lot of our discussion is that, and a lot of work that's been done by our partners throughout the 3 states, is this whole idea of working with these.
We lost Robert.
I apologize. I accidentally hit the mute button. We're trying to get whoever's not muted down. So if your mic is not muted, please mute it.
So doing user categories, I've already alluded to these. So this is when the shake alerts are handed off to the distributors. People do things and things do things. Of course, there's a lot in here, and I know that, I'm not going to go through the list, but you can unpack a lot of these things. You have issues about speed, the notion of latency, how quickly does that message get from the shake alert system to you? And most times people ask us about, well, when am I going to get shake alert? They're asking, when am I going to get it on my phone? And of course, there's a whole host of challenges associated with that. Just to give you a sense of the speeds we're talking about, so we don't know the earthquake is happening until it gets to the surface. I mean, this isn't necessarily Earthquakes 101 talk, but the whole process of detecting the earthquake and getting the shake alert issues happening something in the order of 5 seconds. And then where we're trying to improve this, of course, is on the other end, is getting the alerts delivered quickly enough. And of course, with recent experiences with the appearance of shake alert, LA on the horizon, and other industrial it tests a lot of these things actively. So, let's go back to this. So, and also with regard to people, we're having some very lively discussions now throughout the shake alert system on personal protective actions, on advice shake alert will give. This is, in some ways, this major effort is going to bring as much as we can see consensus, so to help guide the production and the distribution and the promotion of all of our products across the system. So when we talk about shake alert in education environments, of course, and this can maybe sort of be the purpose of today's discussion, is really trying to get the awareness out about the system, to get professionals from various sectors like education to get advice to give us those good ideas, those good applications. Of course, we're looking for how shake alert can be implemented in educational environments, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the technical side. Then there's the whole public third part, which I see it as sort of a triumvirate, is that the educational experiences that go with it, the STEAM learning experiences that cross science, technology, engineering, arts, and that's a controversial one, but I believe it belongs in there, and mathematics. So we can talk more about that later. I'm sure will lead to some fun conversation. So this. We know there's some really great stuff out there from FEMA and other places that provide guidance for work. We're at the wheel. We're here to leverage what we have and build on that and fill those gaps, those very essential gaps. Shake alert poses some very interesting challenges. Of course, as you know, it's all automatic. There are things that just happen that will happen automatically that we have to adjust. So it's, and also there's a whole area that we're working in now. In fact, it's our hottest area of research and hottest area of contention. We had a very lively conversation with folks in Menlo Park last week about post-alert messaging. How are we going to how are we going to craft these messages? We've had some folks working on the social science side of things. On the operations side, it's been pretty fascinating. So very quickly, we have a wonderful cast of of experts, characters who have joined us from all 3 states. One of my roles over the last 3 years or so has been to bring together the 3 states to work together to create common messaging, to create products that would work well across the 3 states, but also give the amount of flexibility that would allow the 3 states to customize things for their own states. And this is a key part, is that we think of ourselves, at least the USGS, this is the sort of the mantra that I've been sort of asked to repeat since day one, is that we're more or less the wholesalers, but we think of our partners as the retailers. We want you to address the needs, concerns, and the priorities of each of your states. And so we have a lot of people working on this joint committee for communication, education, and outreach. We formed a lot of groups that specialize in certain areas. We have the Educational Resources Working Group on a lot of the educational, science education side of things that I mentioned earlier. And they're, of course, we're represented very heavily today by folks working on science education-related areas for ShakeAlert. So just to give you a sense that this has been a pretty interesting operation. Everybody in this room, all the folks from Washington, D.C., and from other institutions that have been a part of this have been a very important part of making this what it is. So we have 5 priorities in our ShakeAlert CEO plan, which we started working on back in 2017. Of course, public safety preparedness and resilience is number 1. That's the main focus. In fact, we're about to devote close to $300,000 into a project to develop materials and communications safety issues, education and training. But you can kind of see from the list that this really covers, these are our main areas of operations, and we are investing our time, our money, and all of our human resources. And so on the list, ShakeAlert Educational Resources Development Dissemination, of course, is the science education enterprise, which you'll hear more about today. We have a lot of media resources and so on. And so back to the technical stuff, I already showed this slide before, just to sort of reorient you. Again, we come back to this whole notion of ShakeAlert as a multi-step process, all automated. And of course, we're learning more every day about currently automated. They're being done all by hand, and it's been a very interesting sort of ride so far. And one of the things, of course, is that we're looking at the different types of tech that we're dealing with in the West. Of course, this is a very limited picture because, of course, I'm from Southern California, and I think of Southern California, the region is, and maybe this is appropriate for those of you who don't care so much for Southern California, but as I think of Southern California as a shattered windshield, and each sort of boundary between the shards of glass as being a fault. It's a very complicated region, of course, a very, very populated region, almost too populated, and so there's a lot going on. And if you look at the rest of the West Coast, of course, we always talk about the 800-mile-long San Andreas Fault as kind of being this the master, thing that always stands out. Well, yes, of course it stands out. You can see it from the air. But also we have these smaller faults and other things that are, of course, of concern in places in the Pacific Northwest and other parts of California as well. So I think this is showing a very limited picture. I know that maybe what I'm about to say is very controversial, but the point is that I think sometimes we focus very heavily on the big ones, on the big earthquakes. And I know that in talking with social scientist colleagues is that we've been moving in the direction of talking more about not only talking about the big events that happen less frequently. So you're talking what a Cascadia-sized event happens, and I'm sure that there might be some debate about this among my geophysicist colleagues, but something in the order of every 250 years or so, thereabouts, right? And so that event doesn't happen very often. It was in 1700. Last major earthquake in Southern California in the San Andreas Fault was back in 1857. But we have these smaller, moderate-sized earthquakes much more frequently. And with the Northridge earthquake in 1990, caused a considerable amount of damage in Southern California. So even the moderate earthquakes. So we want to get away from talking about, at least at some level, the very, very big earthquakes, but also looking at the more moderately sized ones as well. So, and talking about that within the context of ShakeAlert. So again, as I said at the very beginning, we take creative advantage of what earthquakes do. We know that the P waves, first waves that arrive at the surface, that's sort of the harbinger that tells us something is going on. They're traveling something in the order of 3.5, 4 miles per second or so, and S waves are traveling about half that rate. And we take advantage of that opportunity, and we will then start the process and get the ShakeAlerts out. So you can see the advantage here of shrinking the time between earthquake detection and the distribution, the publishing of the ShakeAlerts, or rather the delivery of the ShakeAlerts, which is the part that we've been talking quite a bit about. And so ShakeAlert is about shaking. And so we had a lot of conversations. In fact, some of our newest products that were released recently in ShakeAlert software version 2.0 has to do with discussing more about the issue of intensity. And one of the things that I think that there's an area for some really great collaboration here is, especially in the educational realm, is that there are plenty of resources out there related to teaching about earthquake intensity versus magnitude, and other things. And we think there's a real opportunity here to really improve, to continue to enhance what's already out there. I know that there's been some criticism about this particular table, which is taken directly from the USGS website. But the key thing here is we want to talk to people about intensity and what that means and why you feel what you feel in your location. And so that's a piece that we'll continue to talk about. And of course, in terms of ShakeAlert itself, we also talk about earthquakes. And this is what distinguishes the ShakeAlert system from, as making it the most, I would argue, the most advanced system in the world, is that we have this ability to come up with solutions for earthquakes that happen over very long faults. And so it's known as a line source solution. And so, of course, we have these basic concepts that make sure that we convey to people who are talking to you about this, is that, of course, it's not the distance you are from the epicenter of the earthquake, but where you are relative to the rupture, where the earthquake is rupturing. And one thing, too, is that we cannot tell, once an earthquake starts, how far it's going to go. And the analogy I typically use with folks is a forest fire analogy. You take a match, the match is where that earthquake starts, or the fire starts. I wouldn't necessarily advise anyone to do this, but you drop it on the ground in a dry forest, that match could go right out and hit the ground and nothing happens at all, or it could burn a circle that's maybe a foot in radius, or it could burn out the forest. There's no information from the earthquake when it begins how big it's going to be. And of course, this poses a challenge for ShakeAlert because the longer the earthquake goes on, the bigger it is. And that puts the burden on us to continue to communicate what's going on, the fact that this event is actually growing. So what's shown here is sort of the Southern California event, 180-mile-long segment of the San Andreas Fault rupturing in a magnitude 7.8. So that's, and if that rupture were to go on for, say, close to 300 miles, that would actually be a magnitude 8 earthquake. So that's happened very often, or it's a very, very low probability. But this gives you an idea of some of these things we have to communicate. So we talked about sort of this whole notion of the sort of basic earthquake physics and what the sensor networks are doing. We have, of course, build-out progress. We had a little thing called a shutdown here that lasted about 35 days, and it shows here that we're about 54% built out. I think the numbers have gone up slightly, but of course we've only been back in business for a couple of weeks now. But you can see where we are related to the PNSN and CISN in terms of station contribution. Overall, we're about 54% built out across the West and making good progress. And one of the biggest challenges associated with build-out has to do, one of the issues is, of course, has to do with permitting. And there are other challenges. There are many challenges, and I'm sure that if we could talk to our colleagues who actually do the installations, they could probably give some great accounts of where they found the snags. So if we move on to where we go from the sensor networks, again, 1675, which is the final number across the West, we move into the processing center. So, of course, the information is telemetered to one of 3 processing centers, and the processing centers will make a decision whether or not to publish an alert. The alerts are sent out on the top layer there, something called the alert layer. In fact, anybody who's connected to ShakeAlert now we formerly referred to it as the production server, but we've recently elevated our ShakeAlert so that now all of the messages are leaving are going to folks via the alert layer. So if you connect to ShakeAlerts through user display, or you're a pilot user of some sort, then you're getting messages from the alert layer. And the one key thing here is that we're concerned about cybersecurity as well, so undergone the federal government to be able to protect our information that's being sent out. So, just a demo. ShakeAlert is challenging because on the x-axis is time and y-axis is offset. The key thing is that we have to make a decision about whether or not to issue a ShakeAlert very quickly and within seconds of the event being detected. So given this much information, you have to ask yourself the question, well, is this an earthquake? And you have a 50% chance. Is this an earthquake? You can say yes, or you can say it inside if you don't want to say it out loud. But if you have a risk-taking behavior like I think Max really does, then yes, this is actually, so from that information we ascertain, this is the South Napa earthquake back in 2014, magnitude 6. And so sometimes, sometimes there are earthquakes that are pretty deep. We recently had an event, something's wrong.
Turn it down a little bit because it's echoing through that wall and into that room, and they're trying to.
Oh my gosh! Okay, sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. I'm just trying to
too much of Bob in one place is not a good thing.
Can everybody hear me?
So there is this recent earthquakes that have been very deep. There was one, I guess, in the Anchorage earthquake in Alaska back on 11/30 in 2018 actually set off some false alerts in Oregon. So we get better and better as we do this, but this is one of the challenges. And so earthquake detection, there's a trade-off between speed of making a decision and being accurate, of course, and that's going to always be a trade-off. And of course, we are dealing with background noise. The Earth is a noisy place. There are regional things that happen sort of locally. When I was a kid in Los Angeles Harbor, a ship carrying fuel oil exploded in Los Angeles Harbor, and it actually caused the entire Los Angeles basin to shake. And that's a regional event, something that happened locally that isn't necessarily something that is going to be an authentic earthquake, or earthquake in the sense of being a tectonic event. So I know that's a sort of controversial thing to say. And then there's the issue of telesite, earthquakes that are very far away, which of course I've already shown an example of that. And so lastly, we get, once that information is processed and we decide to issue a ShakeAlert, now with the advent of ShakeAlert version 2.0, we're now issuing 3 types of messages, all with 3 XML formatted messages, one being sort of basic information about the earthquake, the location, the magnitude, and also the time, the origin time of that event. And if the event grows or is above magnitude 6, then the line source or finite fault source algorithm is implemented so that it can process information from the bigger event. And so there is a little bit slower processing time, but not much slower, but it kicks in. The finite fault algorithm can process all earthquakes, but we usually only invoke it, or will only invoke it with the larger earthquakes. And then there's 2 messages that have been recently added that have to do with giving information about shaking. And the key thing here is that the shaking that's shown here is not observed shaking, but it's predicted shaking. It's based on how we understand the region, using these ground motion prediction equations to find out how the area is likely to shake. And this information can be used by our vast army of technical users. Rather than having to do this on their end, they can actually process this and use this information to make decisions about how their what their response is going to be on their end. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about alert distribution that's being finalized, but we're looking at alert distribution thresholds as sort of a three-tiered system currently, one at magnitude 4, and the user can determine the intensity where action is taken for our technical users if they have a specific application where they need to actually invoke a change or some sort of process at a lower intensity. That's their choice. There's a whole discussion about trade-off between what intensity would you like to be informed of an event, or there's a time sort of trade-off with that. If you wait too long, you may not get the shake alert or the shaking arrives. And so that's a whole other discussion. But this sort of three-tiered system gets into the whole realm of phone apps. Of course, recently ShakeAlert LA came on the scene, and we're having discussions with them. Actually, ShakeAlert LA is not releasing their magnitude 5. We've worked this out with them because they are still, the city of Los Angeles is still in test mode. So we have them releasing at magnitude 5 with a to areas will experience intensity 4 and greater. And these are hardwired into the way they're setting when they're doing this, with the idea that they'll reduce the reduce the magnitude threshold as time goes on. And this is the idea, is that as the system improves, we want to reduce the thresholds. So this is the current thinking about all this. So there's one thing I haven't talked about. I talked a lot about the technical, but we're working with to determine things like alert sounds and appropriate messaging, and also the social scientists are working on the side of post-alert messaging. We're bringing together the best people working in areas of sociology, psychology, communication, education to determine, and of course we're bringing in many people from many fields, not just the social scientists, people who are actually boots on the ground, doing this every day, to really give us the best sense of how. So what we want is we want the best product possible. We also want a product that everyone will use. That's important as well. And this phone actually is not exactly accurate because, as you saw on the last slide, the WIA messaging, wireless emergency alert messaging coming out of FEMA's Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, IPAWS, is not going to have any kind of, it's not going to, intense shaking is going to be at a particular location. So this sort of general messaging, we would take out the word soon. We've been advised to take out the word soon. It would just say expect shaking. So it would be earthquake, expect shaking, dock rubber, hold on, protect yourself now. And that it's rendered correctly on the left-hand side. We just haven't changed the graphic yet. And then, of course, we're working on the whole notion of follow-up messages as well. So finishing up here, I know that I only have 30 minutes, and so I know I'm pushing here about five minutes left, that we're looking at a whole variety of delivery mechanisms for ShakeAlert, via cell broadcast. Actually, the wireless emergency alert system, WIA, is what we're working on with FEMA now. That delivery speed is high, and of course, all of these processes, we don't have the end-to-end latency testing done yet. In fact, we're looking at a WIA test in Oakland, in the Bay Area, at the end of March here, and of course, we're now running active tests with cell apps. ShakeAlert LA is being implemented in Los Angeles County. Of course, you can be anywhere in the world and download the app, but you just won't get the Shake Alerts. The data casting project actually being implemented through the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services is a project where they would send Shake Alerts over television frequencies, and you would have to have a special receiver to be able to pick up those Shake Alerts. We're actually Shake Alert through the system so that they would be able to see, essentially test latencies. The process or the project actually developed a receiver for those Shake Alerts coming through the data. I think this just has been recently proposed by folks at through Cal OES to basically come up with an appropriate device that's accessible enough, cheap enough so people can use it. So I showed this at the very beginning of my talk, hoping that in the event that I didn't get to this part, I wanted to at least give a summary. But again, you have all of these delivery modalities through these, well, actually, these aren't necessarily modalities, but they're approaches to delivering Shake Alerts, and you would receive them through various modalities like your cell phone, your nest device at home, your radio, a specialized receiver, whatever. And that's the idea that we want to get this information out so that we can get it to people and things in appropriate times. And we've seen a lot of success. I haven't really spoken to this at all, but we've seen a lot of success in being able to get Shake Alerts to our institutional users, the folks who actually are opening the firehouse doors and those sorts of things, because those Shake Alerts are being transferred over the internet. So a lot of the challenges we're facing. Here is that, of course, and these are key talking points that we share, and of course, we have these common talking points across the system, and actually they're currently being revised. Version almost ready to be distributed to our community, but the whole idea that we have to constantly tell people that Shake Alert is not earthquake prediction, that the system is still in development, we're still working out not a lot of detail, but there's still a lot of work to be done. It's going to take time for the system to improve. We have a lot of great people working on this, a lot of really talented people. Thing is, depending on where you are relative to where the earthquake is, you may get the Shake Alert before, during, or even after the earthquake is over. And this is a really good reason why in our priority number 4 about Shake Alert being one of the tools in the toolbox that you should still do everything that you normally do to be ready for earthquakes. That's a point that cannot be underemphasized at all. And again, Shake Alert is not completely funded. I think we spoke a lot about federal funding and state funding. It's all coming together. We have some great money potentially coming from the state of Washington as well, and also Oregon, but the system is still only funded at roughly at the 50% level. So it's, of course, and that means that we can only build as fast as the money that we have. So I think I'm going to stop because I had some extra stuff to talk about, but this is effectively the end.